Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell, as we continue to expand our conversation of responsible fatherhood. I continue to bring you the brightest, the best, the most passionate, people with integrity, people with great spirit, with all the things necessary to talk about this thing we call fatherhood. And for this week, I reached deep into my bucket of wisdom and wealth, and I'm bringing you someone all the way from the West Coast, my good friend Jerry Tello, and he is going to talk to us today about fatherhood and Latino heritage. And so let me introduce Jerry to you today. He is a father, grandfather, a son, a brother, and relative to many. He is from a Mexican family, Texan family, and Coahuiltecan. I know y'all don't know what that word means. Look it up. I'll spell it for you at some point. But he has all of those roots. But check this out. He was raised in South Central Compton area of LA. I know y'all know where that is. For the last 40 years, he has dedicated himself to the service of individuals, families, communities. He has done so by speaking to over 500,000 people and training thousands of service providers across the nation. Mr. Tello is considered an international expert in the areas of transformational healing, men and boys of color, racial justice, and community peace and mobilization. He's also the co-founder of the National Compadres Network and is the current director of training and capacity building. He has authored numerous articles, videos, and curricula addressing fatherhood, youth rites of passage, culturally based family strengthening, and healing the healer. He is an author of Recovering Your Sacredness, A Father's Love, a series of children's books. He's also the co-editor of Family Violence and Men of Color. He has served as a principal consultant for Scholastic Books on International Bilingual Literacy curriculum and has published a series of motivational, health, and healing CDs. How are you doing today?
Real good, brother. Good to be with you, and even virtually, just to see you. It's always a joy and a pleasure when we are able to connect in whatever we can, because a lot of your work and my work run parallel. We're reaching deep into our own experience and our own life to make lives better, and that's what it's about. So it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. I every time I see you, my heart jumps. I have a picture that I strolled through this album and I crossed this picture frequently, and it was a picture of you and I, and then you and your son in front of the White House some years for the champion of change. And every time I see that picture, I'm like, man, I love this guy. And so I was telling someone about you at some point, and I don't know if you've noticed, I've begun to start wearing hats, and I'm going to get it. And someone said to me, oh, you've never been a big hat wearer. Why are you wearing a hat? And this was right after I had seen you somewhere else I don't remember where we were, but you were telling the story again. And I said, I've heard Jerry tell this story about his dad and his hat time and time again. But for some reason, when I heard it that day, something resonated with me, which was something that I can actually do to leave my children. And I have 6 of them. Right. And I was like, I'll probably be able to leave them a little coin and then leave them some wisdom and some other things. But I'm going to start doing something. I'm going to start wearing hats. And I said, so that when it's my time and they come into my room and open my closet, in my closet is several boxes of hats. and they're going to be told to go into that closet and grab one of the hats that resonates with them the most and brings the most memories to them. And that's my gift, to them. And that was stimulated by your story. And so you see me lately, I'm wearing a bucket hat. I got my fedoras now. I got this. I'm glad, and I'm really feeling that hat. So tell me that story again so everyone can hear it, and then we'll get into the other stuff. But I just think that story is so critical.
Thank you for that. And it reminds me, my father was, he's from, he actually was raised and born and raised in a place called Yanaguana, we call San Antonio, Texas. So my dad was a Texan. He's also Mexican and native, Coahuiltecan, but at that time, you couldn't say that. He couldn't say that because, the discrimination against Native people, even discrimination against Mexicans. So he called himself a Texan. And my father was the kind of man that was a loud talking man. He just talked loud. Hey, come here. What's the matter? You get over here. He just talked loud all the time. My friends would go, your dad, man? I said, no, that's the way he talks all the time, dude, But my father was a loud talking man. But one of the fascinating things for me about my dad, because as kids, you look up at your parents and notice certain things. And one of the things I noticed is that my dad would not leave the house without putting a hat on, And, we grew up in Compton, we grew up in Watts, grew up in that area. So, and, I didn't know we were poor, but we didn't have a lot. And we had one good outfit for Sunday to go to church, but the rest were working stuff. My dad worked 2 jobs. He worked a lot. So some of the hats that he wore, they had holes and stains and, working hats, But I remember my daddy would not leave the house, not leave the house with putting a hat on. But he had a way of putting that hat on. You don't just plop a hat on, right? My daddy would get the hat and he'd put it on like this. And then, I don't know how, but he'd go like that. And he'd do like that, right? And it seemed like when my daddy put that hat on, like he grew, like he got bigger. I thought he was like 6'2", like 5'6". But to me, when my father put that hat on, it's like this big man, But one of his rules was don't mess with my hats. So we didn't mess with his hats, but I was always fascinated with his hats, But one day, my mom was cooking breakfast and my dad was in the shower. And my mom said, go tell your daddy breakfast is ready. And so I walked into the bedroom, and the bathroom was right there, and I could hear my daddy, in the shower singing. He thought he could sing a little bit, and he was in there singing, and I had this little squeaky voice, and one of the things that I admire about my dad is his deep, strong voice too. And I was a little kid. I had a little squeaky voice. I had a little old squeaky mouse kind of voice. And man, how did I get a voice like him? But anyway, so I go in there and he's in the shower and I said, Daddy, Mama says breakfast is ready. Mama says breakfast is ready. All right, okay, I'll be right there, right? And I turn around, and right there on the bed was one of my dad's hats. I said, oh, dude, I'm going to try it on. He can't catch me. He's in the shower. Maybe if I put this hat on, maybe my voice will get deeper. Maybe I'll get bigger because I was a little skinny kid. Maybe, And so I grabbed one of his hats. And I tried to do just like he did, because that's what kids do. They watch their dads and they do just like they do, good or bad. Positive art, they do just like what they see. And so I got my daddy's hat and I put it on my head like that and I licked my fingers like that and did like this and looked in the mirror, and I didn't get no bigger. My voice didn't get no deeper. And what I didn't realize till many years later, my dad died when I was 13. And which brought a whole different experience to me, because as a boy in Compton, especially because of the neighborhood, because of the you having to front up just to get to school, and not so much from the friends, but from the cops and from the teachers. You had to act like you knew something, or were about something, because the teachers would mess with you, and the cops would mess with you, and the store owners would mess with you. So you pretended like you weren't feeling nothing, right? And you learned, I'm not feeling nothing. And so, so I remember when my father died, I didn't cry. I didn't know how to cry, right? And I remember one of my best friends came, "Hey man, I'm sorry your dad died." "Oh man, you know what? That's the way it is." I kind of played it off. "Oh, but that's your dad, man. He was sick anyway. It's probably better, And inside I'm hurting, but I don't know how to express that. I don't know how to share that, right? And so he tried to help me out, by doing what he saw other men do when they were hurting. He says, "Man, let's go to my house. I'll sneak in the kitchen. My dad's got a 40 in there. Let's go drink it." Because that's what he saw other men do, right? He was trying to help me out. He knew I was hurting. I didn't know how to express it. So we went to his house. We drank that 40. And I was like 13, drank that 40 and came, later on I came back home. And when I came back home, I saw my dad's hand. And I picked it up, because I said, and again, trying to be hard. Shit, this is my hat now. He can't look at me. He can't scold me. He can't get mad at me. I can wear all these hats I want. And I picked up his hat, and it was heavy, heavier than I thought. And I said, "Well, what's in it?" And I turned it over. And inside my daddy's hat were all of our names. All of his kids' names. And what I didn't realize until I was 13, that every time he walked out that house to do that work, to cut that lawn, to fix that car, to work that second job, it was for us. And at 13, the hat didn't fit. And what I realized is, who's going to teach me how to wear a hat? Who's going to teach me how to clean a hat? Who's going to teach me how to, tilt a hat? Because the one that's supposed to teach me is gone, right? And I believe that began my journey to wanting to guide, young men on how to be fathers. Who's going to teach them?
Yeah, that's where I'm glad you walked right into where I was going, because I wanted to ask you whether or not that was the major influence for you getting into this work. Talk about that early journey, walking into wanting to play that particular role, which is, I want to now be the one who teaches.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lifelong journey, but I went on to to go to school. And the reason, I'll be real. I didn't like school. School was boring to me. They didn't teach me nothing about my people. It wasn't relevant. I didn't understand how Algebra 2 is going to help me in terms of, making money or business. I didn't understand any of that. And to be real, some of the teachers didn't like me. I was a younger brother of an older brother that was pretty tough and caused a lot of problems. So by association, they didn't like me. But me and my friends, my African American friends, we used to hang out together, and because I hung with them, and some of them were struggling too. You get that association. But so part of my dilemma in growing up is I wanted to figure out, why there was all this pain, because I also saw a lot of pain in community, gang violence and all kinds of stuff. But I really went to school for my mother, to make my mother proud, and I went on to get a degree in psychology and all of that. But one of the things that really bothered me as I began working in communities is, the men that would come, that they would send to me because of whatever reason, child abuse, domestic violence, everything, Black and brown men. And I noticed that there was no treatment for them. They would lock them up. They would violate them on probation. and basically punish them. They wanted to punish, not to heal.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to punish, not teach, right? And I got tired of seeing people that I was working with all of a sudden didn't show up to the next appointment because they were locked up. And not because they did anything wrong, it's because they didn't have money to pay to get to the probation officer's office to make their appointment. So they violated him, and now the dude's locked up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he couldn't pay his child support, not because he didn't want to, but because, he wasn't making enough money.
Mm-hmm.
And so he get violated, and he couldn't see his kids. And because of that, now he's drinking because he's so sad, and it just bothered me, man. I'm saying, damn, So in 1988, being very frustrated and to be real, the other part of it was, some of the men that I was seeing were being domestically violent in their relationships, and deep down it said they look like me. And I said, why are my people hurting my people? Why are we hurting our women? Why are we hurting our children? Right. Later on, I began to understand, the impetus of that wound. Hurt people, and when you don't know how to deal in relationships and you're frustrated, then you lash out, and it's not an excuse. It's just that's the process. But there was no services for them, right? And so I called to all the other men that I knew that were working, whether it be social workers or teachers or advocates or whatever, together, so we could develop some programs. We came together in 1988 for a retreat, and I'll just be real with you. At the bottom of the flyer, because we didn't have no email, so you just put a flyer and send flyers to folks, right? And I, it's to people that I knew and friends. And but I knew my people. So I put at the bottom of the flyer, no alcohol, no drugs, right? Because I know if we start drinking, we ain't doing no kind of business, right? and some of my friends call me, dude, the whole weekend we ain't gonna drink? Like, how about after the meeting? No, fool, we can't. Can I at least bring a sick? No, dude, we can't, because if we start, we're not gonna, And I also know, the reality. So some of my friends, they wouldn't come. They didn't go, I can't go a whole damn weekend without dress. Crazy. You crazy, man. You're getting too educated or whatever. But 19 men showed up. 19 men showed up. And we began, kind of a discussion, starting out with who are you? Because some of the guys didn't even know each other. And to be honest, some of the guys were from neighborhoods before, now doing work. And neighborhoods that were warring before, but now we're trying to do some work. So there was a little tension in the room. So let's get to know each other. And we went around, who are you? What's your intention for being here? And the second brother in began to share why he was here, of course, to help, the community. But then he shared something deep. He says, man, what I'm really struggling with, I'm losing my family. And he's this dude's a PhD. Psychologist, right? So he gives service, and he says, I don't know how to love my wife. I don't know how to love my kids, because I didn't have a dad. And the other thing, and then he dropped the bomb. He says, and I'm gonna say something I've never said to nobody, and especially in front of men. But I was abused as a kid, and he began to cry. Now, back in '88, to see a man cry like that, it was like, what's going on? I mean, the only time we saw, us cry is at a funeral, or we were too drunk, we started, hey man, I love you. Yeah. But straight up, sober, open, we never saw that, And so when he began to cry, it's like, whoa. But then he began this deep cry where, where you see guys cry where you can't talk, like, man, you could feel it deep. And when he cried that deep, it touched us all. And then we began to share at a deeper level. And what we realized when we went around that room as Black, brown, indigenous men, is that we had bought a lie. And the lie was, just get your education, get your degree, get your house, get your car, and everything will be fair and equal. Didn't realize that we hadn't dealt with the years of racism, the years of oppression, what we had seen our dads go through, our moms go through, what our community still go through, even though we were professional now. Mm-hmm. We realized that we were still all jacked up. And so some of us were drinking, some of us were working too much, some of us were, whatever we were doing that wasn't healthy for our families. Mm-hmm. And even though we were doing intervention, we didn't know how to be honorable men and honorable fathers. Right. And on that day in 1988, we made a commitment that the most revolutionary thing we could do was to heal us and to reclaim a sense of sacredness in manhood that indigenous Black, brown men had. Because then I began to remember the honorable men in my community. In Compton, there were honorable men there that worked hard, that raised good families, went to church on Sunday. And even though they didn't have a lot, man, they whatever they wore it good. They had one hat, they got one good hat. We would iron our pants, even though we only had one good, but we would iron those suckers, we would polish those shoes, you make yourself, so then I began to realize, you know what? We do have honor and sacredness in our families. And there are men that are good, that have been good, even in Compton, even in Watts, even in Brooklyn, even in Jersey, wherever they're there. It's just that nobody recognizes us.
Mm-hmm.
That became that journey,
Yeah, the crazy thing is when you, because I was going to go a whole different direction, but you shifted me to dig into another, and I'll bring you back and we'll talk specifically about the nuances of responsible fatherhood as it relates to Latino families. I think that needs to be its own subject matter in and of itself. But I want to stay in here because you just said something about that resonated with me with a couple of slides that I have in one of our curriculums, where I have a slide with a bunch of old TV dads in there, all of the old guys. And I always ask them, like, what resonates with you when you see these guys? And, guys, I remember Fred Sanford or James Evans or George Lopez, or they remember all those guys. Yeah. And then the second slide that I pull up has Don Corleone, Tony Soprano, Homer Simpson, Lucius from Empire, Ghost from, all of these dudes, right? And I was like, what's the difference between these fathers and those fathers? And then people start to describe their life. And I said, that's not my question. I didn't ask you about their careers and how they make their money and my question was, what's the difference between these fathers and those fathers? Because if you follow their TV or movie character, the one place where you see the good in them is when they're engaged as a father. Right. If you think about The Godfather, for as much as what the Corleone family was, his love for his three sons and his family was undeniable in that. And so if you translate that into the guys that you're talking about and the guys that you and I work with each and every day, and trying to figure out how to tap into the good in who they are to make that a priority over all the other things, that's part of the journey. But where I want you to pick this conversation up at is what you talked about, is this notion of this individual crying and then the what comes next. And the what comes next is the thing that I think I've heard you speak about the most. And it is that need to heal. So why is that so important when dealing with men in particular, that we find ways to get them to understand the importance of them healing before they try to be whole?
Well, I the reality is that trauma that is not transformed gets transferred, and either, and it gets transferred in a lot of ways. We just experienced a pandemic, that really devastated, especially, in Black and brown and indigenous communities. But one of the things, that I remember during that time, around the same age, is in the community, there in Compton and Watts, there was called the Watts riots or Watts blowouts that were happening, right? All kinds of stuff. And they sent National Guard in. There was a National Guard tank on the corner of my house, right? And my friend Tyrone came to pick me up for school. We were walking to school, and we walked back by the National Guard, and one of the National Guard got his AK-47. You heard him, right? And we like tightened up, like, dude, whoa, what's up here, right? And then he said, should we go to school? Yeah, my mom said we got to go to school. Yeah, but this fool's right here by the house, man. Should we, but we were like, oh, and we walked to school. And as we walked to school, we're thinking about, what's up with this dude? Is he gonna, what's gonna happen? And we get to school. And I remember that day, I was very nervous. I was real tight. My leg was shaking. I couldn't learn nothing that day. I couldn't wait to leave school to go home. And that night I didn't sleep real well. It interrupted my sleep, my breathing, all kinds of stuff. And what I didn't understand till more recently is that when you're in fear, when you're in stress, when you're in trauma, your body inflames. Mm-hmm. Your body inflames in order to protect your organs, right? So you're tight, you're tense, you react, you do all that. What's supposed to happen when the stress and the trauma and the danger goes away, your body is supposed to return to normal, right? Breathe normal, the inflammation goes down, all that stuff. How about if it never goes down? How about if trauma never stops? You always stay tight, right? And that's what trauma is, that if you never heal, you're always tight, you're always on, you're always hypervigilant. You always, and it messes up your sleep and messes up, your digestive system. It's not coincidental that during COVID, a disease that preys on inflammation, impacted, especially black and brown people so much, because we're already inflamed from the pressures that we have in normal society, right? Mm-hmm. And especially with men, you talk about, my my wife, when she talks about this, and especially with women, she says, holding your tears is like holding your pee. It is not healthy. Right, it is toxic. It can affect your kidneys. And reality, holding your tears is not healthy. Wow. It affects your kidney, your liver, it affects your spirit, it affects your ability to love, it affects your ability to express, it affects your ability to be real, to open up, and one of the most powerful things that I've been able to do with my children is to share with them what I'm really feeling, mm-hmm. and to cry with my children sometimes, because they then saw it was okay. And to say, I'm crying, but I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to break down. I just need to release that, and it's okay when you need to do that too, and I think that interchange of love, of compassion, of vulnerability is the healthy part of fatherhood. Mm-hmm. That we need to, first of all, among us men, we need to open spaces, and you see it, man. You see it in sports all the time. Yeah. When these dudes are crying and hugging, and you see it all the time. So it's not like we don't have it. It's just that we've been indoctrinated that there's only certain places that we can share that, right? Mm-hmm. And so let me, with this, because you asked another question I want to make sure we get to. Is especially in Latino culture, is this concept called machismo, right? Mm-hmm. And again, let me just share that the people that came to conquest us or enslave us or take our land and all of that began to create a narrative around us, a false narrative around us that then made us feel bad about who we were, right? So the concept of machismo, truly from an indigenous concept, there's 12 principles, and the principles are all honorable. First principle, honor women. Second, honor children. Be sensitive, be compassionate, be a man of your word. There's 12 principles, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what happened is the conquerors came and turned that upside down, because they wanted the men to be like them, that were patriarchal and misogynistic and controlling and sexualized and uncaring. And, so now you have so-called indigenous or Mexican men acting like that. And they say, look they're being macho, and they, bastardize that term. So now we think macho means to be, this violent, patriarchal, controlling, womanizing, drinking fool, that's not the true meaning of that.
Right.
But I can't even use that in my culture, because if I say I'm macho, it's like, oh, you are, oh, it's toxic masculinity, right?
Right.
And what I use the term is, I use the term of sacred manhood, the sense of being sacred, which is truly who we are, and the duality lives within us too, the trauma lives within us too. But the reason why we gotta deal with the trauma, because if you don't deal with the trauma, it may take over the sacredness. Wow. So when I work with men, domestically violent or drinking too much or addicted, I was saying, so where did that trauma come from? Because now it's taking over your life, brother. It's taking over your sacredness. When you slap your kid like that, that wasn't your sacredness. That was your woundedness. Let's talk about that. And if you're not willing to unpack it and let it go, it's going to grow. And now everyone will see you in your woundedness and think that's who you are. That's not who you really are. Right. That's what you become because of the woundedness. So, within that, a lot of the work that we do is recovering for a lot of men the true sense of their sacredness and the true sense of what it means to be an honorable, Latino, honorable Mexican man, honorable African man. What does that truly mean? And see, our grandfathers knew that, man. They know how to carry themselves, I remember walking to the store with my dad, and there was a guy next to the liquor store. There's always a guy next to the liquor store, and he had, his bottle of wine right there, and he was kind of propped up there. And his name was Mr. Joe, and we were walking by him, going to get something at the store. And my dad said, "Good morning, Mr. Joe. How you doing?" And you see this guy, "How you doing, sir? How you doing?" And my dad said, "Hello, Mr. Joe." "Hi, Mr. Joe." And he didn't dismiss him as homeless. He didn't dismiss him as, he said good morning to him, right? I remember one day we were walking several weeks later, and Mr. Joe's hair was all up in the air. You could tell he had a hard night, and he was laying there, his eyes a little bit crossed and stuff like that. And as we were walking, I started to laugh. I laughed. That's what's the matter with you? Look at Mr. Joe. Look at he looks funny. And my dad, "Hey, you don't be doing that. What's the matter with you?" Right. You don't know what he goes through. We could be like that. He's somebody's dad. He's somebody's son. Right. You don't be talking about people. You could be like that someday. Right. I apologize to him. And it was a big lesson for my father that, we all could be there. But still within men that are wounded, that sometimes are disheveled, there's still the sacredness that remains. Yeah. And that's, the search that I've been on with men, my whole career, trying to get them to recover, to uncover, to discover again that sacredness so that they can be that for their children, because that's what their children and the community needs.
Yeah, that's the our program that we run here in Atlanta. Our direct service program is under the umbrella of our Gentle Warriors Academy.
Right.
And I remember when I came up with that name, Gentle Warriors, someone said to me, "You think guys will want to be involved in something that says gentle?" I'm like, "You've already dismissed the word warrior before I even got to the program." I was like, you can, there is an element of being a warrior that is gentle, like for the most dangerous feared warrior there is for their children, you will see the gentleness. And if you don't have that gentleness, then you don't really have anything tangible and important or honorable enough to teach your child, right? And so for our dads, we don't want them to forget the warrior in them, but we also don't want them to forget the gentle in them either. And gentle doesn't mean weak, right? And warrior doesn't mean dangerous. We got to work on both of those things with our fathers walking into their communities. When you look at, because I know that many folks have missed the boat in really understanding the nuances of working with African-American fathers, working with Latino fathers, and specifically Native American fathers, right? They haven't figured out how to incorporate this whole notion of spirituality and faith, right? Which is part of our DNA. It really is part of our DNA. How do you infuse that into the whole healing part and helping these guys really understand being a dad? Being a dad, it's important for you to kind of understand what you believe in and what you have faith in.
The whole sense of, we look at those 4 dimensions in terms of health and wholeness, which is physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, and spiritual is a very significant part. It's a role that for many of us, our elders, our grandmas, taught us about and made sure, and even when we didn't do it, they did it they prayed for us. My grandma would wake up at 4:30 in the morning, every day and start her prayers. She'd come to the room and bless us all up, and not just me. I mentioned my friend Tyrone would come over the house, and usually around lunchtime. He's like to come around lunchtime, right? Because he knew my grandma would cook. He said, "Jerry, you want to play?" I said, "Man, you just come on because my grandma's gonna make lunch right now." No, I want to play, fool. He wasn't smart. He wasn't dumb, And my grandma would come out, pues, ¿quién quiere comer? Right? He raised his hand like that. I don't know where he learned Spanish from, but he raised his hand. And my grandma would call him Mijo. It means my son. But she went in the house to eat, and she prayed with him too. And so then we'd go to his house, and his grandma, Miss Mosley, called her Big Mama, she'd sit on the porch all the time. And every day when I'd go pick him up, she'd come up and she says, "Good morning, little Jerry." I said, "How you doing, Miss Mosley?" "Oh, I'm good. Come here, baby. Bless you, child. Bless you, baby. I'm gonna pray for you today. You're gonna do good in school." And to me, those grandmas, if it wasn't for those prayers, I know I got through some stuff. All of us got through some stuff, and we say, "Dang, how do I get out of this? How do I get through this?" The cops to let me go. It wasn't because I was slick. It wasn't because no, it's because some grandma's prayers. Some people were praying for us to get through, because you and I could be locked up. Right. You and I could, be in a whole different situation, but somebody had faith in us and breathed into us their dreams, right? And so what grandmas and grandpas and what many our cultures do is teach us how to breathe into ourselves that sacredness. And another, I mentioned we used to go to church on Sunday. And I remember, again, my best friend, we always to hang out Tyrone, and I had a new basketball, right? And I said, "Hey, Tyrone, hey, come over after church and we'll play. I got a new basketball." He said, "I can't come over today." I said, "Why?" "I got to go to church." I know. We'll come after church." No, we don't come back till night. I said, "What?" "We go to church till night." I said, "Till night? Well, you got to go to church all day, all night for, dude. What's up, man?" "I don't know. We just go to church all till night." And I could not understand that, till much later. This elder shared to me, says, Brother Jerry, at that time, that was the only safe time for us, where we could go in a place where we knew people loved us, we knew people cared for us, And we had to inoculate ourselves up that whole day.
Mm.
We could get through the rest of the week.
Wow. Wow.
You know, and then I understood. Then I totally understood.
Yeah.
Because if that's the only day you feel whole and welcome and seen and blessed,
Right.
you're going to stay all day.
Right.
You can stay all day.
Yeah.
And then when you don't feel good, you got to remember those times. And somebody said I was a blessing. Somebody said I'm going to do good. Somebody said, you know, that's that spirituality. That's that spirit,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that our grandmas knew about,
Mm-hmm.
that I won't go to church, man. That's boring, you know, but when we get out of some trouble, she's like, hey, thank you, God. I remember rolling down the street after a party. I've been drinking too much. I'm rolling down the street and I see a cop behind me. And what do you do when a cop? You begin to pray, please God.
That first, right?
I promise I'll go to church. You know, I mean, we get holy all of a sudden. You know, but it's like exercise.
Right.
If you have that as a practice, then it comes to you like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, then you're going to struggle. And I'm not talking about any particular religion. I'm just saying belief, prayer, wholeness, that sense of faith, in yourself, in your people, in the goodness of the world, because there's a lot of other side out here that will overtake you, make you pessimistic, make you not want to live, make you want to act ugly, so that other side is really important to have as a resource, but also as a grounding point for your life.
Man, Jerry, there's so many spaces. I wrote down a couple of things to bring you back and talk about specifically, this nuance of working with Latino fathers. I want to dig and dive into that a little more. I also want to talk a little more about the spiritual and faith component of this work, because I think we just missed the boat, on that. We missed the boat on how do we infuse this whole notion of making sure, that the fathers that we're talking about, like we have a module in one of our curriculums on morals and values. And, and to your point about not having a religious conversation, it's not a religious conversation. No. It's what are your guide rails? Like what serves as your moral boundaries? How far will you go? How far won't you go? What do you value in life? What do you prioritize in your life? Those things are important. What do you believe in, right? And that's a question that I ask, because if I know what you believe in, that tells me something about you. Right. I remember growing up, my mother's from North Carolina, and I used to, from 6 years old to about 13 or 14 years old, my mother put me on a Greyhound bus in New York City, and she sent me to North Carolina to live with my uncle, who had a 250-acre farm, and they harvest tobacco and a bunch of other stuff. So he was a true farmer.
Yeah.
And in every summer, back and forth. And I remember after a little older, my mother and I went down there and we went into the Piggly Wiggly. I don't know if they have Piggly Wiggly on the West Coast. Yeah. And so we're walking in, and I'm standing somewhere, and this lady comes up to me and she goes, are you a Braswell? And I said, yeah. She goes, are you Ken? She started asking me questions like, are you Ken? I was like, yeah. She goes, I know what you look just like. You look just like one of them Braswell boys. And I just kind of like thought, I was like, wow. I was telling my mother what's that. She was like, that's, when I grew up, people knew you by who you were attached to. So your name told them something about you. It told them about who raised you, what values you were raised on, what morals you were raised on, what you believe in. They don't have to know a whole lot about you as an individual if they know who you're attached to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think how that connects to spirituality is we need to understand that in this society, this Western society, this society that tried to destroy, conquer, and debilitate who we were from a cultural standpoint, is the value that this society then began to embed is individuality. You are you. You're just an individual by yourself. Pull yourself from your bootstraps. You got to do it on your own. Don't worry about nobody else, right? And if they isolate you that way, right, then it's easy to control you and to indoctrinate you and do it. Now, if I know I'm connected to my ancestors, and my ancestors were powerful, and they had dreams, and they're praying for me, and I'm connected to my grandmother, and I'm connected to my family, my community, and not only that, I'm responsible because whatever I do is going to affect them.
Right.
I carry myself a whole different way. So when people say you ain't nothing, well, yeah, what do you mean I ain't nothing? Yes, I am. Or you getting a D in algebra. Yeah, I know, but I don't know algebra, but I know some stuff. I'm connected to some, I mean, it really creates a whole different sense of who you are. But the society wants to break us down and break us apart. And even culturally, Black, brown wants to make us different and wants to make us that, that we're, fighting for the same monies. And they'll do that. They'll put funds in front of us and say, so there's certain structural things that are going on. But, when I gather in circle with men from different cultures, and I ask, a native brother to pray, whatever way you want to do, just ground us in whatever way you ground yourself. And he uses a traditional song, native song. Then I ask the African-American brother, and he's then sharing a Christian spiritual, right? And then, one of us will share, it brings a sense of spirit connectedness. I don't care what religion or what way you do it. It's a set, and it's interesting because, we push back, society push back against that, but you can do mindful meditation though. It's okay to, it's like, what? Isn't that a sense of invoking spirit, isn't that but there's certain ways that are okay. So what I'm saying is I ain't half-stepping. I'm not half-stepping. This is who we are. This is what men need. This is what our families need. And this is what we need to teach our children. Right. I need to tell my kids, you have so many people around you. And I want you to know, I got kids. My kids are grown. One's in Oregon, one's in Arizona, the other one's here. And they need to know, I pray for you every day. You need to know that your daddy spirit is with you every day. Right? And anytime you need anything, you just call my name. You just think about me. My spirit's going to be there right there with you and help you and comfort you. And then you can also text me or on the cell phone too. But just know that because here's the opposite part of that. Isolation is the number one risk factor for mental illness, suicide, substance abuse, all of those things. Right. So that sense of interconnectedness and the spirit helps to do that. Wow.
Jerry, tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Well, you can go on my website, jerrytello.com. Also, National Compadres Network, you can look us up. We also have a podcast called Healing Generations, if you want to check that out. And we bring different people on. I'm waiting to bring you on so that you can share some of that knowledge too. But that's the way. And appreciate you, brother. I mean, you've always been a leader in our community, and you are one of those honorable, sacred men that becomes a guiding light for so many. I want to thank you for everything you do and that you've done for so many, and for being a really close brother and close friend to me. Over the years, and we're still in it, man. We're still in it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, which reminds me of the other subject matter I have to bring you back on, because I sat on you guys' last webinar on Babas and grandparents. And man, I was sitting here and I was like, this is such an awesome conversation. I was like, I gotta bring them into my space so that we can have that conversation about our transition, right? Our transition from being fathers to being a father to our fathers, and the father not only forward, right, being fathers to our grandchildren, but actually being caretakers for our fathers, right? Because we don't talk a lot about that. Being caretakers of our parents who are getting older, and then raising our children, because we know at some point they're going to have to be caretakers of us, right? And so we got to get this thing right. So Jerry, thank you so much for joining I Am Dad podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell, and we'll see you next Sunday, same place, same time.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am Dad, period.